Hello, it's Oliver here for the last part of this Saint Mary's Gonzaga analysis. This time we're going to look at the output windows that I've made for the two games and see if we can find anything interesting from them. The first thing that sticks out to me is how similar the two are. So looking at this first game, my new kind of favorite stat for some reason is the amount of points, what percentage of your points come from a certain type of shot. So Gonzaga here, they scored 65% of their points from 2-point shots. Now, if we look over at the second game, we can see that nothing really has changed. It's only still 64% of their points come from 2-point shots. Same with their 3-point shots, 25 over in the first game and then 26 in the second game. So not a drastic difference. Even for St. Mary's, there's a little bit of a difference, but again, it's not that drastic. 59 in the first game for 2-point shots, 52 in the second game, 3-point shots. 32 in the second game, 23. So there is a bit of a dip in that 3-point shooting, but it's not that drastic. As we can see up the top here at the scores, both games were drastically different. So Gonzaga and St. Mary's had a very tight game in this first game, and then in the second game, the score doesn't even reflect how much Gonzaga kind of blew St. Mary's out. If we look at the quarter analysis, which we'll come to shortly, I mean, if we just look at the first quarter, it's 24-8 after the first quarter or the first 10 minutes. So the 78-65 doesn't really illustrate how significant the initial domination was. Looking at all the other stats, they're all pretty similar between both games. Rebounds-wise, very similar. Blocks, St. Mary's actually had a lot of blocks in the second game despite losing. The other thing that I'll point out that I found quite interesting was just up here in the second game, the shot discrepancy. So Gonzaga had 68 shots to St. Mary's 53, which 15 shots is quite drastic when you consider the eventual point difference. And you can make a conclusion that it was such a significant point difference because of how much more chances Gonzaga had to score than St. Mary's. It's quite simplistic when you think about it, but everyone just come down at how many 2-point shots they shot. 14 more 2-point shots. Shots very similar 3-point shots, but St. Mary's, well, both teams were awful from 3, but St. Mary's even more so, 5 from 20. So I found that quite interesting. Again, in the first game that Gonzaga lost, they had more shots, but it wasn't as drastic as a margin, only 7 more shots than St. Mary's did. Coming over to the shot quality. There's nothing too interesting to get from this, except in this first game, St. Mary's had a 15% shot quality from the low post. And just to recap, shot by shot quality, I mean 15% of their shots were of good quality. This is just from my personal coding, and that a good shot to me was a shot that was open. Not so much a made shot, but a shot that was open, not contested, not a poor shot. Whereas a poor shot would be one that was contested or, someone draped all over you and things like that. So they had 15% shot quality in that area, which is of course very low. 34 shots in the low post as well, which if we come over look how many eventual field goals they had, is almost, well, it is over, is it over 2/3? Around 2/3 of their shots came from that area, so a significant amount of their shots came from the low post. And when you see how much of them were low quality, you can see why so much they lost. I mean, obviously they didn't get a lot of their shots in that area, 56%, which is quite a low percentage for such a high percentage area. You would expect in the low post that because you're so close to the basket, especially when you're doing transition, which are quite open shots, and when you have such a dominant player like Landau, who's the Australian centre, that you would have quite a good, even if you'd had a bad quality, you'd still make quite a lot of shots in that area. Had quite a high perimeter shot quality, but again, they just weren't a great 3-point shooting team. Not so much in this first game, though. What was there? 67% in this first game, so obviously didn't translate into the second game. Gonzaga, again, a lot better low post shot quality. Again, a lot of their shots came from that area. 31 of an eventual 61, so around about half of their shots came from the low post, but a lot of them were so much better quality, and they made more of them as a result, so probably another reason why they won this first game. Looking at the shot quality in the second game, St. Mary's shot quality in the low post actually got better. And I'm amazed Gonzaga's is so high in the second game, considering that they were blocked 9 times. But again, if you look at the number of shots they had in this area, Gonzaga almost had double the amount of shots in the area than St. Mary's did, which is, again, referring back to that initial observation that Gonzaga had, 15 more shots in total in the second game. Now finally to the quarter analysis, which is really interesting to look at in these two games specifically. This first game where the game was really tight, as you can see, it was really kind of pick and go. Both teams were equal after the first half, pretty tight third quarter, and then St. Mary's just kind of blitzed them in the fourth quarter. If you look at the eventual shooting statistics, I mean, neither team had any turnovers, but 21% for Gonzaga and 57% for St. Mary's. So just creating better shots in that fourth quarter. In this second game, again, very interesting quarter analysis. Quite the opposite from that last fourth quarter in the first game, in that Gonzaga kind of blow St. Mary's out, 24 points to 8. Again, far better shooting, 53% to St. Mary's 21. In fact, that's almost a direct opposite to this fourth quarter that we looked at the first game, where it was 57 to 21. But yeah, drastically better shooting, double the 3-point percentage, only 1 turnover to 2, better rebounding, and then from there they just cruised. Really strong third quarter, better than their first quarter, but at this point the game was already decided. I mean, St. Mary's also put up 18 points, so a better effort as well, but 63% from the field is quite a good effort. 0 turnovers, 40% from 3, not great, but 71% from 2-point range. And then the fourth quarter, St. Mary's, just made a late charge, but it was kind of in vain. Now, this last output window, I don't know why I hadn't thought of it earlier for some reason, but I was just like, what happens if you just databased the two games together and then looked at the stats for both games? So that's what I've done, and it's the screenshot from the output window. So Gonzaga won the 2-game series by 10 points. And again, you can look at these stats, just quite interesting, because you can make a far more kind of macro observations. So points from 2-point shots, Gonzaga make more points from that area. Very similar threes. As you can see, it was so much lower. And then when you look at free throws, drastic free throw difference. If you looked at the St. Mary's offense review, you would have seen that St. Mary's loved to drive. Those drives, and especially with Landau on the post, is such a strong player, cause a lot of fouls, so they eventually get a lot of free throws from that, and a lot of points, 22 points in total. Rebounding is like identical. Fouls are identical. St. Mary's way more turnovers, but way more blocks as well. But Gonzaga had more steals. Shot quality wise, St. Mary's overall had lower shot quality in the low post than Gonzaga did, which is always interesting, but drastically better perimeter shooting. I think because they do it not as often, and because Landau was such a significant focus of their game, that all those kind of shots in the low post create open 3-point shots from the perimeter. They play inside out, you could say. But again, it's just interesting seeing how many shots, like I'm just looking at the shot discrepancy up here and how it relates down here. Between the two games, Gonzaga had 22 more shots. When you think of a 10-point difference, that's quite a lot. And that's resulted because I'm just looking at how many shots they had in the low post. Gonzaga had 72 shots in the low post, where St. Mary's only had 59. I'd thought that would be the opposite, but apparently it's not. They also had way more 3-point shots. I mean, 30 from the top of the perimeter, 17 over here. I mean, it's way more shots in general Gonzaga had. And looking at the quarter analysis is quite interesting as well. Drastically better first quarters for Gonzaga, but then the complete opposite after two tight, 2 and second and third quarters. Drastically different in the fourth quarter. St. Mary's have 37 points to Gonzaga's 19, which is crazy. That's almost double the amount of points in the fourth quarter. I mean, that helped them in the first game, but by the time in the second game, the fourth quarter came around, it was kind of in vain, and it didn't matter. But look at these field goal percentages in this fourth quarter. 22% off more shots. 54%, crazy differences. 1 from 9 from 3-point range, whereas St. Mary's are 2 from 6. So, drastically better fourth quarter stats for St. Mary's. So that was these are the output windows. If you actually want the code window and the output windows, I'd be happy to send them to you. Just send me an email, which will be in the description, and yeah, I'll send you the code window and related output window. Cheers.